Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Kriss Marion of Blanchardville is a Democratic candidate in the 51st Assembly District. The election's November 3. Kriss, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Great to be with you, Steve. Welcome to my bedroom. Hopefully my naked grandbaby doesn't run in.
That's fine if he does. I've got nine grandchildren, I understand. Listen, You have on your campaign website 5 goals: clean water, broadband, better roads, senior housing, mental health. You can't get all that done. I want you to pick, of those 5, the top 1 or 2 issues and why.
Great question. You know, I think most people who know me think of my signature issue as water or maybe homemade cookies. But I would say that really the top issue is good government for me. Most of those things cannot be fixed without returning to civility, returning to professionalism in this legislature, and getting rid of gerrymandering. Frankly, we are boxed in by these districts, and we have a legislature that is not as responsive to the district as they are to their donors.
So you just said you're a fan of the Governor's People's Maps Commission?
I would say I'm a fan of the Iowa model and whatever model we land on that gets us fair maps. I've looked at the governor's proposal. I like it. It's up and rolling now, so that's pretty exciting. I know we're going to have a big battle, but yeah, I'm in favor of fair maps, and I've been lobbying at the Capitol for fair maps for long before I ever imagined I'd be running as a candidate.
You know, this drama over police reforms played out nationally and right in our front door in Kenosha. The governor's got 9 bills. Senator Weingart has 8. The speaker's going to form a task force. What policing reforms are you convinced should be enacted, please?
Well, I don't have a lot of faith in the speaker's task force as someone who has had water as a top priority. You know, we got basically nothing out of that year-long, grueling, all around the state conversation.
Can we talk about water a second? Because
sure.
The Assembly, I had an Assembly member who served on the task force tell me, we in the Assembly dropped 13 bills on the Senate, and then the Senate went home. So is that the Speaker's fault? You can go back to water because it's so important. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. I always appreciate the opportunity to talk about water. You know, I think the Speaker knows the leadership of the Senate pretty well. I am under no illusions that the task force was intended to produce results. What the task force suggested was almost exactly what the governor had already put forth in his budget. And a lot of those folks voted it down. So that was a huge disappointment to me. And frankly, the failure of the Speaker's task force on water is why I'm running against Todd Novak, the head of the task force. We are friends. I have been meeting with Todd on water for years. And he asked me if I was going to run, and I said directly to him, let's see if you get anything done on water.
Okay.
So I'm very disappointed about in the work of the task force.
Okay, but I took you away from policing reforms. What policing reforms do you think are necessary?
Yeah, so you talked about the drama unfolding in your backyard. You know, it's not unfolding in mine. It's very different out here in Southwest Wisconsin. We have a great love for our law enforcement professionals, a great respect, and their impact in the community is huge. And our issues have a lot more to do with not having enough funds to put toward training and towards hiring and toward decent salaries. You know, the idea of having body cameras, that's just laughable in a rural district, we could never begin to afford that. We can't afford enough jailers. We can't afford to upgrade our jail so that it's safe for both the law enforcement and people who are incarcerated. So our problems are different, but I am very much a fan of what the governor proposed. Those are no-brainers. We had a proposal that almost was completely in lockstep with Van Vanguard's, but yet we couldn't come into session and hammer something out together. That is why I am running, and that's what I mean by good government. This legislature will not work with the governor, and that is a complete failure for our citizens. I will say I'm not in favor of limiting municipalities or counties from making their own decisions about law enforcement. That's a non-starter for me in the Van Vanguard proposal, because I'm a county supervisor and I am a tremendous proponent of local control. And that was a huge red flag to me in there.
Well, if you can't fund your jail, is it because of the limits, the caps on property taxes that have been around for 20 years? And my question is, should those caps and limits, because we're a high property tax state, should they be continued?
Yeah, we struggle and labor, especially as rural counties, to get basic services done with levy limits. Now, is lifting the levy limits the answer? I don't think that's the whole solution. I think what we need is tax reform across the board. The amount of giveaways that we give to special interests and we leave money on the table that could be returned in revenue sharing to my community, to your community, to me, that is fiscally irresponsible and yet another example of bad government.
So local governments should have more revenue options. Is that what I hear you saying, Kriss?
Absolutely. I think everything should be on the table. And look, we're heading into a truly troubling financial time in this state, in this nation. And I think it's going to take creativity. It's going to take new solutions. It's going to take saying no to some of the old alliances and the old assumptions about how we get things done. Look, in local government, we are always struggling. We are raw democracy with not a lot of resources, and we're always struggling to get it done with a little, but we have to get creative because of the unfunded mandates, for one thing, that are imposed on us. Don't get me started about mental health and what that means for local government. But yeah, we need to get creative, and we need to talk about tax reform across the board.
At a state level, if the state budget is, I'm making up a number, $1 billion short because of the pandemic slowdown, you're a legislator, how would you make up that shortfall? Would you raise taxes and fees, or would you cut spending?
I think you got to do everything, right? I'm a small business owner. I run a bed and breakfast. I'm also a county supervisor. So budgets, balance sheets are always, they're a big puzzle. There's not one answer to the whole thing. I think we need to look at it all. And like I said, we are due for tax reform in Wisconsin. Our tax code is complicated. It's a mess. But you know who loses? Homeowners and small business owners. And we need to find a way to stimulate the economy and make space for those folks to be the engine of the economy, as they should be.
As the states around Wisconsin legalize medical and recreational marijuana, what's your position?
Well, I was in here 2 years ago talking to you at about the same time. And at that time, I was very much unequivocally in favor of legalization of medical marijuana. My position has moved largely because I live in an agricultural community and we need options. There is nothing we can do to save rural schools. I don't care how much we play with the funding formula. We're not going to have rural schools if we don't have rural people. If we don't have families on the land, Wisconsin agriculture will be completely transformed as we know it. The image that we have of ourselves, we love our farms and farmers in Wisconsin, and we won't have them on the land if we don't give them options. So I'm for full legalization. Let's tax it, let's regulate it, and let's make space. Let's make sure that we have laws that keep space for small and medium farmers to grow and to sell and to get the most profit possible from legalization. I think we're behind the states around us, and our farmers stand to lose the most of anybody.
Let's talk about the pandemic and COVID. On September 28th, the governor's got to make a decision. Should he continue the statewide mask edict or let it lapse? What's your opinion?
Well, Steve, I'm frankly shocked that you would bring up the mask mandate in this interview.
Oh, forgive me, but it's a very emotional issue.
Well, it is a very emotional issue. And I think that's largely due to a failure of leadership, both at the federal level and at the state level, and a capitalizing on a health pandemic for political grandstanding. I am frankly shocked that our legislature in Wisconsin has become really the laughingstock of the nation. We dropped the ball on so many levels. Now, I understand that some of that behavior was enabled by a president who's doing the same at the national level. But my question is, we need to be fiscally responsible as legislators. We have been paying health professionals to study, to advise, to work with their colleagues across the nation, to work with the CDC. Why would we flout the advice of our health professionals? It doesn't make sense to me. Why are we paying? Why is Lafayette County paying a health department? Why do we sustain these jobs? Why do we have a health department in Wisconsin if we're not going to listen to them? That's embarrassing. So the mandate's about to expire. It's almost over. I feel that we have been set back immeasurably as small businesses by not getting control of this early on. The nation did not get control of it early on. There's nations all over the world who got a hold of this, and they're back to work. Our challenge now is, how do we get Wisconsin back to work? Because we can't afford to basically limp along the way we're doing it. Small business owners, again, as a small business owner and a lover of small towns and main streets, I think some of the folks who have been hurt the worst have been small businesses who had to create their own rules. I got my bangs cut today, and I had a nice conversation with my hairstylist. They had to make up their own. They had to make up their own rubric for how to come back to work safely. They had some guidance from the state in the form of brochures, but that was not enough. And then they had to contend with customers who came in and didn't appreciate that they were making up rules. The people who should be making up rules about health should be health professionals, not legislators, and for goodness sake, not small business owners.
Well, this speaks to an issue that Senator Capping and Representative Bourne, their bill says if an organization has practiced some adopted COVID-19 protocols to protect customers, patients, or employees, they couldn't be sued. Would you vote for that bill of Bourne and Cappinga?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting proposal. I find it interesting that we couldn't protect our own first responders in our COVID relief bill. We couldn't guarantee that if they contracted COVID, we would take care of them on the job. And now we're coming at it from another direction that basically ignores the real trauma and trials of people who are on the front lines working every day. I am not saying I'm completely against some proposal like this, but this raises a lot of red flags for me, especially when you look at places like Brown County, or worse yet, when you look at Iowa, where so many people have died in factories. Now, largely, the populations that are affected don't have the kind of voice that some of our legislators do in terms of having influence. But we need to stand up for workers. We need to provide good guidance. And this idea of, if they have done everything they can to prevent COVID, how do we even know what this is? Because we get mixed messages, from our leadership. That's a very troubling bill, and there's a lot of questions that need to be answered about it.
The frontline role played by hospitals in the COVID-19 treatment of patients, does that mean they need an even greater priority in the next state budget than they may have in the current one?
I'm really proud of the hospitals in my district and in my region at large. We have some really high quality rural hospitals, and rural hospitals have had a real challenge. We in Lafayette County are a half an hour from a hospital. No matter where you live in the county, you can get to a hospital. I'm really proud of that. And we do need to absolutely commit. I'm speaking primarily of rural hospitals because I'm a rural legislator, but we do need to commit to helping our hospitals work through the economic challenges that are to come. Top priority is accepting the Medicaid expansion. The fiscal irresponsibility of leaving that money on the table is breathtaking to me. And as someone who really likes to work across the table, I've interviewed a lot of folks on the Republican side of things. I've talked to a lot of hospital administrators about why you wouldn't take this expansion. And I remain very confused as to why we haven't, especially when so many red states have. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. This continues to perplex me. And I look forward to having more conversations about this when I'm in the legislature, but I definitely think we have to start there. And then I think, along with lots of tax reform and funding reform, we need to look at the whole picture. The budget is a value document. So we need to weigh all of these values very heavily and allocate wisely.
Last year, as you know, the governor recommended raising the gas tax to fund highways and bridges. 30.9 cents a gallon hasn't been raised in more than 10 years. Could you vote to raise the gas tax, Kriss?
Yeah, it's interesting. I will say that most of the literature, the negative literature that was produced by dark money groups, like Jobs First, who's now been in trouble with the IRS, highlighted that I was for an astronomical amount of raising the gas tax, which I never said. I certainly never said an amount. I think that's something that you hammer out with your colleagues in the legislature. But I will say we're desperate for infrastructure investment, especially in rural Wisconsin. Our tractors are getting bigger and heavier as our farms consolidate. There are a lot of counties where you have to go miles and miles to find a bridge that you can get across with that piece of equipment. That is a shame. And in Wisconsin, we should be proud of our infrastructure. And we have defunded our infrastructure for too long. And that is embarrassing and really a shame. Whether it's a gas tax or whether it's some other way of getting it, I'm open to all suggestions, but I'm not open to waiting. Probably would not be in favor of another speaker's task force on how do we fund the roads, because I think we know we got to get it done. We just got to get it done. We consider this an emergency out here for us in Lafayette County, in Iowa County, in Greene County. We need more road funding. And we had a library meeting last year. I think it was a year ago. About 100 people showed up in the Pecatonica High School library. It was a lot of local government people, township leaders, supervisors from counties, road workers, a lot of EMTs, and several state legislators. And one person from the back of the room, who was a town supervisor, stood up and said, "How many of you would be willing to pay 80 cents on a dollar if we could get the roads done?" And everybody stood up, which shocked me. It shocked me. But that tells you how desperate we feel out here. It's just not safe. It's just not safe driving on these roads we have Amish, we have ATVs. We make a lot of money from ATV tourism. And we're sharing our roads with tractor implements, Amish, and ATVs, and then high schoolers learning how to drive, So we really can't afford to wait. This is something that we have to act on quickly.
Should local governments like the one you serve on, if they contemplate a major public works project, should they have to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses?
Well, in Lafayette County, we've had some of our own controversies, even just about buying trucks, to replace on our land conservation department. And sometimes you can get a little cheaper if you are negotiating outside of your community. And the loss there is obviously revenue and money that circulates in the community. The other loss is that the more local your contractors are, where you purvey stuff from, the more you know that those folks are actually investing in your community in ways that are not always seen. Our teams, our events. I think it's interesting where you're asking this question about local governments, but Wisconsin has lost a lot of DOT jobs to Iowa since 2017. My opponent voted for Act 59, and that sent a lot of work to Iowa. And that's a big loss for our contractors. In my community, we have a lot of laborers, a lot of operating engineers, and I would love to see them get more of the slice of the pie that goes to that infrastructure investment that we're going to have if we change some of the faces in the legislature.
Last question. You've outlined your differences on clean water with Representative Novak, who you're challenging. 2 or 3 other differences with your opponent on November 3?
Oh, that's a great question. Todd and I have some bizarre similarities. We both came out of journalism. I'm a journalist by trade. And I chose instead to try and make a living on my farm, which we've done quite well here by diversifying, catching waves on different high money operations. And now we have landed on bed and breakfast. And I think as a small business owner and someone who's in local government and someone who's a grandma, I bring a lot of different pieces to this job. Todd had been mayor for a year when he ran in the assembly. And I've been in local government for 3 terms now, seen a lot of things happen. And the thing that people know about me, if they're from my district, is that I get stuff done. Todd is very nice. I enjoy Todd a lot. We've had a lot of great conversations, but I don't have anything to show for those great conversations. And water is just one of the issues. Let's just bring it back to the water. The whole thing that kicked off the Speaker's Task Force on clean drinking water was the SWIG water quality test that happened in my district. 3 counties, Iowa, Grant, and Lafayette. There was a proposal that the extension would help us do a survey of wells, private wells in the country, because there was some concern that there was a fair amount of contamination. I was a huge proponent of that. I championed it from my role on the county board. And when my county leadership, a few people objected to paying our share, I privately fundraised the money. So I'm going to get the job done one way or another. And I think that's the biggest difference between Todd and I. We're both very independent. We both like to talk across the aisle. We both work across the aisle a fair amount. In local government, there's no parties. So you just have to get the job done. If you refused to vote for a colleague's proposal because they were a Republican in county government, you wouldn't get anything done, and vice versa. We can't dig our heels in the way they do in Madison. And I think that is an ethic that needs to change at the Capitol. Thank you.
Kriss Marion of Blanchardville is a Democratic candidate, the 51st Assembly District. The election is November 3. Kriss, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
Great to be with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.